Hi guys, well it's been around 4 years since we reviewed a Phanteks case here at Vortez, and that is no fault of our own. We've reached out to the marketing team on countless occasions and it is like trying to get blood out of a stone. But anyway, that aside, today we finally have something from them in the form of this new P400A or P400 Air. Now the P400 hit the market in 2017 and this new version here is largely based on that design, except there is more importance attached to the cooling. Now you'll know in our last video that we had a look at the Corsair 220T, which is almost going to go head to head with this case that we're going to be reviewing today. The front grille on P400A is heavily ventilated to encourage good airflow, and inside we have an all black interior decked out with a triple RGB fan configuration, and the lighting on those fans can be customised from the front panel. Now there are 3 versions of P400A available. Phanteks call them digital black, digital white, and then just black. The black version has no RGB and just a fan controller, whereas the digital versions have digital RGB and then lighting control. Now the pricing on this sees it at 84 in the UK, 95 in the US, and then 150 in Australia. And like we said last week, this price range is loaded with plenty of good options, and so Phanteks really needs to bring something good to the table. And today we're going to be exposing everything, so enjoy. Before we get into our review, today's video is brought to you by ASRock and their new flagship Z390 Phantom Gaming X. This new board is packed with features which set it apart from other Z390 boards. It has 802.11ax, otherwise known as Wi-Fi 6, giving you support for that new wireless standard with greater bandwidth, as well as providing bi-directional MIMO support. ASRock has given Gaming X a flexible integrated I/O shield, so you're not going to struggle to fit it into your case. The PCI Express M.2 slots have been given this huge heatsink cover, which promises to keep your SSDs nice and cool, as well as keeping that GPU heat away from your drives. And on top of those features, this is an attractive board for a new config and is loaded with cutting edge tech to get the most out of an Intel system. For more details, check out that link in the description. So beginning at the front, we have a mesh panel which allows the air to enter into the chassis. There are no gaps at the top, sides or bottom, just on this front facing edge. The overall build quality on this case is questionable. There is a slight bubble on this front fascia, as you can see here. Our side panel also has a slight dink in it, and the chassis itself isn't the strongest, and so I put it to you that the build quality is quite average. Now this panel on the front can be easily removed. All we've got to do is pull it from the underside. You would expect some sort of dust filter here, but sadly there isn't one. Behind our mesh panel we have 3 digital RGB fans which are 120mm in specification. Those, as you can see, are configured as intakes to push air across your system. Now the front panel connectivity is split into 2 sections. The first includes the power button which marries up to the RGB system. And then we have 3 buttons which sit on the underside of the lip. There is a reset button, an RGB mode switch, and the RGB color switch. And so all of our fans are connected to this controller, allowing us to tap into modes like solid, breathing, radar, sparkle, and rainbow. And then beyond this we have the compatibility with the addressable RGB systems from Gigabyte, Asus, MSI, ASRock and Razer. And then in the other section we have 2 USB 3 ports and the headphone and microphone jacks. Would have been a nice touch to have those USB ports styled in black to correspond with the theme of this case. Blue just stands out and it isn't really cohesive. Moving further back, there is a magnetic dust filter which conceals the top section of P400A. This can be peeled off and it reveals mounting for 2 120 or 140mm fans. Those are not included, so you will need to source those yourself. Okay, so for the side panels, on the prominent side here we have this large tempered glass panel which gives us that nice edge-to-edge viewing. That panel is secured onto the chassis with 4 thumb screws, and then over on the other side there is just a solid steel panel with no standout features. That is held into place with 2 thumb screws from the back. With those panels now removed, we have a view inside P400A. This case, as you can see, has the standard layout that you would expect. It accommodates up to eATX form factor, but only up to 272mm wide, and that will cover up the rubber grommets. Around the case we have the storage options for different sized drives and the cutouts for cable management. So let's check this out now in more detail. Now the power supply sits at the bottom of the chassis, and covering it up we have this large enclosed area which spans right across the case, and so it's essential to install from the reverse side. And we're glad that there's plenty of space for cables and nothing needs to be detached, even for a larger power supply just like this. Underneath the power supply there is a detachable dust filter which can be quite tricky to get hold of. Would have liked to see the handle protrude just a little bit more so you can grab it. Above the power supply we have a series of 7 horizontal PCI covers with the cutouts for ventilation and the thumb screws. We don't have any vertical covers, which is a shame, but Phanteks do supply an optional attachment which can be purchased separately. Unfortunately, there is no rear exhaust in this case, so if you wanted a push-pull configuration, that is something you'd have to add in yourself, and that spot there will take a 120mm. If we move over to the other side of P400A, we have the storage allocation. So first of all, we have hard drive cage at the bottom, which supplies us with 2 trays, which can either take 2.5-inch or 3.5-inch drives. Screws will need to be attached to a smaller drive, but for a larger one, the clips on the side secure the drive into the tray via pins. And then we have 2 metal trays on the back of the Mobo tray for installing SSDs. The trays are held in place with rubberized screws, and the drive itself needs to be screwed into the tray. Now additional to this, we have this configuration which runs up the front side of the case, and each plate can coordinate with one of Phanteks' hard drive brackets. But again, those don't come with the case, they will need to be purchased separately. Okay, so finally we're going to get a closer look at the clearance options within P400A just to verify what fits and what doesn't. And so for the CPU cooler, Phanteks specify 160mm, our Hyper 212 is 159, and you can see there is sufficient space there before it would touch that panel. In the graphics card department, there is up to around 420mm, so you won't have to worry at all with any high performance GPU. We've got a Gigabyte RTX 2070 installed and there are no issues at all. Now the area behind the Mobo tray is vital for tucking away those cables, and here we have just over 2cm, which isn't too bad at all. Cable management inside P400A is pretty good, with cutouts and hooks for keeping things tidy. My only complaint is the cables from those front cooling fans. First of all, there are 2 cables per fan. There is also nowhere to suitably tuck them away out of sight. There is a gap, but you can't keep the cables in place. The other thing is the cables themselves aren't particularly long, so you can see that I've had to feed the cables through the hard drive plates to keep them concealed, but also to ensure that they get to the board. And then for water cooling, due to the mounting coils at the top and clearance, we can't install a radiator plus the fans. But at the front, we can install up to a 360mm radiator, and then to aid that, the bracket towards the front can be detached to create more space. Okay, well that is the new Phanteks Eclipse P400A. It joins the fleet of float-oriented mid-towers which seem to be hitting the market at the moment, and it is difficult for us not to compare this to the 220T that we looked at just last week. And when we put those head to head, it is tricky to weigh up which is better, though the P400A is slightly more affordable. With this case, there are definitely some things that you need to be aware of. The build quality isn't the greatest, as I mentioned earlier. The front panel has a slight bubble in it, and the chassis itself can appear to be quite flimsy. There is no rear exhaust, even though this case is touted as an airflow specific model. The top cannot take a radiator and fan combo due to the mounting placement and clearance. And I think the price, which is $84 in the UK, $95 in the US, and then $150 in Australia, is still asking a bit much. However, it is a fun case to build inside, and it gives you slightly more space to maneuver for things like components like the GPU. The overall look is great. The front grille design with the cooling fans is definitely something which adds that lovely depth to any build with that cavity, especially if you can catch it from a slight angle. The ability to customize the modes and the colors on the fly from that front panel is a good touch. The lighting system, of course, can synchronize with all those major board vendor RGB tech, and there's also the extra 3-pin connectors to add in more devices later on. So what do you guys think of this new case here, this Eclipse P400A? Let me know in the comments box below, and also cast your vote in the top right corner. For the cooling performance on this case here, the full review is going to be on the screen and in the description very soon. It helps us out if you can like this video, and even better if you can subscribe to the channel. Have a great day guys, and I'll catch you soon.